Hello, my name is Mark Taylor, and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hello, welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast. Great to be back with you as always, and thank you to everyone who's been sharing the show with their friends, their colleagues, their family. It makes all the difference to the reach and to get as many people as possible listening, when hopefully the whole point of this is to really give the young people in our lives the best opportunity and the skills and understanding they need to be as successful as possible. Now, today I'm delighted to be chatting to Nat Greene, and Nat's latest startup, Futures Forge, is a challenger to the current university system. Now, Nat's mission with Future Forge is to provide gifted students the opportunity to develop the core skills and attributes that matter far more for career success than which college you went to, and to seed a market-viable alternative to the four-year degree course, and to create competition and strategic choice for families everywhere. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation. It's fascinating about how the world of learning is changing and how that might affect you and your family. I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Nat Greene.
Hi, now. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. One of the things I love is people's take on what they deem to be the traditional route into education or learning, and having their own spin on it based on their experience and their passion. And I think this is going to be a great conversation to sort of dive into that and to sort of see what world and life and learning can look like through someone else's eyes. Yes, thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Fantastic. So for those who haven't come across Futures Forge, tell us, first of all, exactly what it is, and then we'll sort of reverse engineer it back into that journey of how it created it.
Yeah, so Futures Forge, I started it last year with a former colleague of mine, and we were both pretty disappointed about the state of education across the board, just based on how far short it's coming compared to its potential, right? And in spite of all the wonderful people doing their best in it, right? There's a lot of people working really hard. There's huge amounts of resources spent, and so many people seem disappointed. And we decided to focus on a couple of problems in particular, largely with a US-centric focus on tertiary education in the United States, so what we call college or university in the United States, and how can we change that? And I'd spent some time trying to work within the system to see what change was possible, how we could reform it and improve it. And I came to the conclusion that it was impossible to reform from within. Or certainly I don't have the skills to do it, and neither did, my fellow warriors on the journey who I was working with to do that. And so I stopped that, and I decided I need to do something external. And that's what we're doing at Futures Forge.
I mean, I can completely identify with that. I have both sides of those coin. I still do some percussion and drum teaching within a school. So, I mean, it's light touch in terms of, being there in the classroom for many, many people. But even then, the system, the hoops you have to jump through, the paperwork, the expectations, the lack of reality in terms of us working as professionals outside the one day a week we might be in a school is amazing. And I sort of ebb and flow with this kind of, but I can be different in myself and work in these surroundings and do the best I can, which I do try and do, to the other day of just kind of, this is just really, really difficult. And actually spending your energies, like you said, creating something you're doing it outside seems like, especially now where so many parents and so many pupils and young people understand that there is an alternative to that sort of traditional route,
Really?
Then you can put your energy in and you sort of bring those people with you, which I guess is what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and the scary thing is you look at how powerful the university sort of system, the educational industrial sort of complex, is in the United States, and how much it costs to attend it. And I think that it's become so ossified. I mean, it's a system that was designed before the internet, before Google existed, before AI, before women were allowed to go to college, right? And it's that same system. And it's become so bureaucratic with layers of regulation that constrain what people can teach, who can be hired, what they can teach. And it just reduces innovation. It's ironic that the place where people in theory learn to go to learn about how to innovate has had so little internal change. And it really gets summed up by, like, here's a question I ask people. tell me what evidence you've seen recently, like a peer-reviewed scientific paper that demonstrates that going to college for 4 years makes a difference. And there's literally nobody I know. And yet in the US, people are spending $10, $50, $100,000 a year for their kids to go to college. And there's no evidence at all. And you wouldn't buy a car on that basis. You know, you look at the crash report and see what the safety ratings were and what consumers thought. And there's nothing. And this idea that everyone should go to college and that the current system is the right system is just bonkers to me.
Yeah. And I've thought the same, and it often comes up on the show in terms of the traditional sort of school. I know we're sort of talking slightly older than that here today, but that sense of, you know, we know it was sort of pre-industrial revolution, you know, that idea of this is how we need society to be, and we know society isn't like that now. And I saw a really interesting comment. I think it was a social media post from someone who just said that even if everyone takes that as a given, what about childcare? What about the fact that both parents are working? What about the fact that children need somewhere to go? If you can't just change it in one fell swoop, and no one, like say, knows how to change it from within. And so until there's such a time that it sort of stops, then what can they do? I think the really sad thing, of course, is the fact we had the pandemic and school did look very different. And we could have learned so many lessons from that, but everyone was so keen just to go back to what we already knew, get back to normality, that the opportunity seems to have been gone for the majority of people, obviously not everybody. And I think, like I said, from a university and college standpoint as well, there is that kind of, for so many generations, it's been, this is what you need to do because it gets you out of maybe your current life or your current societal situation. This is going to guarantee you a job. And I think even in my lifetime, it's that kind of, you know, I had A levels and then I went and I got a degree. It seems very much now that just having a degree is kind of your basic qualification once you get sort of past school, and then you need to do a master's and then a PhD, and then you're kind of qualified. And then, like I say, you've got all those levels of learning and money that go with it. And then we also know that employers post all of that are thinking, actually, it's the core skills. It's the person we're interested in. And especially, like I said, with technology and AI coming into the factor, we don't just need them to know stuff. We need them to be the people that are going to transform them. And I guess that's really where your focus is and what you're able to sort of support people.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to try and think about this with a clean sheet of paper, right? And you're like, people, they're turning 18. We know they're probably not 100% prepared for the world. Some are. Some people are, you know, they grow up quick, they build the skills, they have the maturity. But for a lot of us, you know, we kind of need a little time, and some social time is very important. Again, that was reaffirmed during the pandemic, right? People need that social interaction time. And you go, well, how can we prepare people to really, you know, thrive in their life and career? Then you would have a totally different system, right? You wouldn't have the current system at all. And for example, like you might start, which we've chosen to do, which is to start by asking the question, well, actually, before I get into that, as I said, not only had I tried to drive reform within the traditional system, but when we started this venture with Futures Forge, we tried to start by just improving the current system, right? So you take the system, you go, what are the bits that are a waste of time? What are the bits where we need to enhance it? And that was like just blended your brain as well. So we had to just throw the whole thing out. And then the question was, what is it that gets you hired or promoted? Okay, what are the things that employers say, the skills you need? And we looked at that. And then the other thing we did is we looked at the scientific research that exists on what attributes that people develop, what mutable attributes, i.e. you can improve them, right? What are those attributes that lead to success? And there's a whole bunch of research on that. And when you look at them and you start to build from there, it's totally different because this knowledge-based approach that we take because of the legacy system, you know, i.e., you know, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, I mean, even when I went to college in the early 90s, and, you know, you had to go to a place, a physical location, because it had a library, because it had the books you needed. And that's how you built a community, because, you know, you have one person living, you know, over here, someone living over there, you had to come together. And all of those constraints are now gone, all of them, yet the system remains. And so yeah, it was like, how do you build it from a different, totally different mindset of and it seems ridiculous because it's like, what's needed? You know, who's the real end user of you know, the time that's invested and the time that's invested in college? Well, it's obviously the individual, right, who's going out there. But for most of us who aren't going to start a business straight out of college, our own business or our own venture, that means we need a job, which means really it's the employer. who's the customer. And so we got to understand what they need and build from there.
And in terms of that research and that understanding, how do you sort of change that narrative when you're kind of speaking to people about this? Because it makes perfect sense to me, and I'm sure it makes perfect sense to a lot of people. But they're that kind of, but my CV needs to look like this qualification, that qualification, this experience in that traditional sense. And until I guess they see a certain amount of people that are being successful doing it differently, it's quite a hard thing to change.
Yeah, so if you look forward 10 years, I don't believe there's any chance that the current system that we've had, the legacy system, it has the power that it currently has and exists in this state. And if you are well informed, obviously as you are, I mean, you'll be in the top small part of a percentage of people who are informed on this topic, then you already know that the building blocks are all in place. And so, you're talking about the difficulty of how do you manage the transition as an individual. And I think the only way to do that is to understand that you got to do both. So I've got 2 kids in college at the moment, and I've got 2 more who are headed that way. And I wish none of them had to go off to university for 3 or 4 years. I think it's sort of a waste of their time and a waste of my money, equally importantly. But at the moment, it's a necessity because you haven't built the robustness of the brand of a new way forward. And so you got to do it in parallel. I think you have to make sure that you learn the skills that you need to succeed that aren't being taught in university, by the way. And where they are, it's ad hoc at best, right? People learn it through like clubs they're in and this kind of thing. They learn it through other hardships, but they're not teaching those key attributes. And they're all available, on our website, which I know will be linked and stuff. They're all available to understand, and there's lots of ways to go and improve them. And I think you have to make sure you find a way to learn and do that work, and then be patient with the fact that your university degree is almost certainly going to be worthless to you. And you go, how do we sell this? How do we get people to understand this, right? Which is the big thing. I mean, that's the great challenge of introducing anything new. But there's obviously the study side. You have to sort of debunk some of the myths to begin with. So people say, well, if you go to college, you earn $25,000 a year more on average. But they're looking at 2 different populations. So you've got the population of people who typically were stronger academically, were probably always going to go into harder, jobs that paid more, sort of not hard from a physical work, but from an intellectual capacity, right? A scarcer resource. And then they compare it to people who didn't go to university. So they were probably from the lower half of intellectual potential, right? Academic potential. And they compare those 2. So it's just totally false. Like if that's the best argument you can have, it's totally worthless. It's like me, any other thing. You talk about basketball and you go, well, basketball players end up taller on average. Well, that's because we select the basketball players because they're tall. People don't understand that sort of thing. So there's that. There's obviously the angle of employers are now more, increasingly using skills as a way to assess people coming in, especially at the sort of harder jobs at the biggest brand name businesses. Your resume isn't really very important to them. It might get you through your first cut, but deeper in, you've got to demonstrate skills and attributes that are needed, and they will test you hard. So I think that's becoming clearer to people. And then the other thing, the other macro stats that are fascinating is only 60% of people in the United States who start at college finish. And so that 40% who attend some college and don't finish, they're the ones being most destroyed by the system. They're the people I want to help the most in the end, right? Because there's, and that's why I like the micro-credentialing movement, okay? Because, you go for a year and a half to college and you don't finish, it's basically worthless under our current system because you don't have the stamp of your degree. The other thing is 60% of the people who finish college are in jobs that don't even require a degree. Now, of the people who are in a job that requires a degree, half of them enter a job that never uses anything they studied at all. So when you start to look at that, you sort of build a waterfall of it. You sort of wonder what the heck's going on. And I mean, for myself, I studied a vocational degree. I did engineering, and I went into the consulting field, very technical area. And then I started my own business, and we hired like 80% of the people we hired had an engineering degree. They used almost zero. Like of everything I learned in my engineering degree, even though I was in a technical space, in industry, doing stuff, I used almost none of it. Like I grew up in Hong Kong and I studied there until 16. Then I went to boarding school in England. I did A levels, and then I was at university in England. Then I moved out to the States, and like I think my A level physics was much more useful to me than my entire degree. And so you're sort of head scratching. You go, why are you doing it? And I think when you have these chats with people, many people recognize that that's true. That there's such a difference in, like, there's such a distance, rather, sort of connecting what you studied and what you actually have gone and done, that it's sort of like if you could come up with some other thing, even if it was a 3-month course that just helped you understand what you're passionate about and what you really want to do, and then find the easiest way to get into it, and then go to college. That might be a massive investment, that has a huge payback sort of thing for individuals. So anyway, that's sort of the sort of areas around which we discuss with people.
Yeah, I just love the parallels, because when I went to music college in London, it was the first year that they'd made it a degree course. But the only reason it was a degree course because it was then affiliated with another university, which gave funding. It was purely that kind of thing. So there was a little bit more academics involved in it as well, but it was purely, it was a way of being able to become a musician. And there was always that trade-off between, look, are you here to come to the lessons, to do the workshops, to study with these amazing people, or do you have to do this one thing? And there was always that kind of, I'll do this rather than that. But it was the practical experience. It was meeting the people in the field. It was getting across London, being able to drive to a recording studio, none of which was in the actual course itself, but stuff that we learned by being there. And the first time anyone asked me for my degree was about 15 years maybe after I'd finished, maybe a little bit before that, was when I was applying to a school to do some just literally like a few hours in teaching. And at that point, it became really important to them. So my entire career up to that point, it never been mentioned. And actually, that degree has nothing to do with my ability to teach at all, other than the fact I'm doing this specialism. Anyway, so I was just sort of, it is amazing. I completely sort of understand that. So let's dive into how the touch points work in terms of what you offer. How do people get involved? What do they get out of it? How do they choose how it works and all that sort of stuff?
Okay, so we started last summer, and the only course we've taught at the moment is an IAP course at MIT in January, right? That was our first pilot. And then we're running 2 2-week summer camps this summer, starting to put people through the paces of our method of teaching and the focus on the topics that we're using, which I can go into. Then we're going to expand that into some longer courses, and then we're looking to build a 1-year program that, from our perspective, will replace college. But as I said, most people I think who take it will take it as a gap year and then go on to college. They'll be very disappointed at college after it, but that's not my problem. That'll be their problem. And so that's what we're doing. And so in the teaching, it's all project based. Okay, so no grades or anything like that. We believe in testing people. We don't believe in sort of grades and that sort of thing. Even just because, it's just so mindless. My kids at school, they're studying some subject, and like 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, they get some report that tells them how they're doing. Well, why don't you tell them the same day? Okay, and so the way we operate is we have teams of people that have a challenge, and they can be really simple things like, build a bridge across this stream or something. You have a small budget, and you just got to go learn how to do that. Look it up online. Have the AI design it. I don't care. Copy someone's YouTube video from 6 weeks ago. You just have to solve the problem with your team. And so you have different teams competing. And at the end of it, those teams will assess each other. They'll give feedback. A core piece of our belief is to teach people how to receive and to give feedback, because if you can't do both well, you can't do either of them well, right? And so then they let each other know how they're doing right then and there. And, they can vote on who they think won. We don't really care. They'll care because it'll be competitive. And then you take from there. And the next day we do something else. And that's what we're going to do across the spectrum of things. Design a new product, make a pitch for some issue. It doesn't really matter. Like we have a whole bunch of things lined up, and they're just going to be different because we want people to be outside of their comfort zone, and none of it is knowledge based, because knowledge is just totally commoditized, and yet that's what the system's all about. I mean, I could tell you the mathematics I learned that I've never used. I'm sure it helped me in some deep way that I don't understand, right? But I never used any of it. What's the point? And so, but the skills of getting something done, of learning how to work with a team, understanding like the first steps of getting feedback where you realize, oh, I don't have to just be defensive. And then realizing for the next 10 years that you're still just as defensive as you always were. It's really hard sometimes to change, right? And get better at that, which means you need a team, you need the right community. And that's what we're focused on creating. It's like, it's a cauldron of learning sort of thing. And hence the Forge, right? For Futures Forge, for those of you, who like metallurgy in any sort of way. You apply pressure and heat and stuff and to good raw material, and you can make something beautiful out of it, right? And have it realize its potential. And so that's kind of what we're doing. And so we're doing our 2-week course this summer. Then we're going to expand it. It's a very agile startup. As we learn stuff, we'll just adjust. We learned a bunch of stuff at MIT that we pivoted in how we focus and what we're doing. And then we're planning to launch our 1-year program in September 2025. So
Fantastic. And I think sort of carrying on from what we spoke about before, that kind of, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. People are still going to go to college. I think there's also now this sense of, I want to take control of my learning despite maybe the constraints that I have. And I think being able to take something like this, understanding the value to yourself and how that looks going forward, which is why I love these conversations so much, means that, like, say, if you're still thinking, maybe I'm going to have to go to college, or even I want to go to college at the moment because that's just kind of where I am, you're also feeling like you're sort of adding bits to the puzzle that you want to. And I think it always reminds me of the Slight Edge book. It's that kind of, you don't have to do anything extraordinary necessarily. You just have to be sort of diligent about what you want to do. Do the stuff that you're meant to do the stuff that you want to do. And like you say, a lot of people won't even turn up to the lectures. A lot of people won't even look at doing something extra. And you can really enjoy yourself and just do what everyone else isn't doing, not because it's extra, but because it's just there for you to have. And that puts you in that top, few percent of people, which is automatically going to give you opportunities that you never thought you were going to have possible anyway.
Oh, the most important thing for people to understand is anything you want to learn, you can learn just, on your cell phone, right? It's all available. So there's nothing holding you back from developing any skill or learning any knowledge you want except yourself, which is why finding a way to understand your motivation is so important. And like, I keep coming across this because, as you'll know from your passion of running this podcast and the work you do, the more you start talking about this, the more wonderful stories you hear, right? So I came across this young man. He lives in the UK. He's suffering through some degree that internally in my family, we call it studying unemployment. Because, there's no clear link between what he's doing for 3 years and any job that he's going to get or anything that he's interested in going forward. He's just ticking the box, right? It's a credentialing exercise. And so what he recognized that, and of course, he spent his first year doing the usual thing, going out, drinking too much, partying with everyone, not really paying much attention, mailing it in, doing the bare minimum sort of thing, of course. And then he realized this isn't going to work. So he got a job 20 hours a week, working, as it happens, for an American company, selling stuff, and he gets trained by them. He gets instant feedback, and he's developing the skills to learn how to sell and think about it and how do you communicate with people and what works, and and more complicated sales techniques of sort of getting them to elucidate their needs and things. And that's what he's doing. And he calls college his side hustle. And I think that if you're going to suffer through college, then great, and understand that, get the most out of it, but have a critical lens. Like if you go to a lecture and you think, this is a total waste of my time, don't think that that's your problem. Like, don't think that there's something wrong with you. Understand the system's totally broken. It's totally out of date. And then just fix it. Of course, you probably got to get through it, get your 2-1 or your 2-2 or whatever, suffer through that. And then, make sure you're starting early, learning some skills, or at least dabbling. Like, go try a little bit of sales. It's wonderful to do some sales. You have to sell stuff all the time. You might find you hate it. Great. Go look at something else. And I would suggest like focus on that. And of course, you can do some of that in college. You can be captain of the rugby club, or you can be part of some group that does community service in your local community, and you learn something about leadership. So go do those things. So those are some things that are, connected to the institution that you're at, but you can also just go totally outside of it. Don't limit yourself is what I'd say. And that's how you can sort of halfway house this. And of course, as we build our program, maybe you can come to our program.
And I think what I love about this and the essence of the conversation is the fact that it applies across the board. We certainly have these conversations with our kids when they were younger. I mean, they are in university and that as well as some still at school. But that sense of, and don't just do what you're told to, keep your head down, not ask questions, just sort of do the status quo, which is kind of what a lot of sort of organizations and schools want because it's easy for them. Because the reality is you're a long time learning and it's going to be terrible. But also that sense of, but you can put yourself out there, but also you can, like say, you can question what it is that they're doing. So ask smart questions, like say, put your energy into those things. And if you've got limited time and limited energy, especially in the modern age for young people as well, it's that kind of, it's okay just to do the best within that thing. And like I say, if you're putting your energy into here, and here, which is going to give you a massive payoff, but it means that you're not going to get 100% and you get 99% if it is a silly example, but it's really working for you, then that's fantastic. And for that to be okay, which isn't the thing, because one of the things that we come across is the fact that, of course, every teacher, every situation when you're in education, they're only interested in their own thing. You're the only person who's interested in you, which has all of these things going on. And so that's where, even talking about mentors or coaches or just a good peer network, really understanding where you fit into all of this and you supporting yourself, whether that's, like I say, from a mental health point of view, a physical point of view, a friend's point of view. It's so important. And I think the conversation we're having today is specifically about that sort of age group in college and university. But I think if people listening don't have children at that particular age point, understand that you can start to feed in the process of what that's going to look like. And like I say, especially bearing in mind that, like I said, in 10 years' time, the chances are it's not going to look the same anyway. So being ahead of the curve is only going to be a positive.
Yeah, and it's the whole, this whole learning how to learn is so critical. And while I might have the position that a lot of what's going on in college is a waste of time, that doesn't mean that you don't have to develop your skills in advance. Okay, so because it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. When you come out and you're looking for a job and you come out in the middle of a recession or skills are shifting and that sort of thing, and you can't just join your family business or something, right? Then you've got to go do something, and that's why it's so important. And you compare and contrast that. Someone was telling me the other day about their old college in the States and how one of the it was an English class, right? And the professor has now gone back to handwritten essays in class, in control, like rather than you write your essay, in your dorm room or whatever. And it's because everyone's using AI to write their essay. And they thought this was quite a good thing because it's like, oh yeah, stopping cheating and maintaining standards. And I was like, what's the point? Like, it's like saying, let's go back to reaping wheat, with a scythe sort of thing and make sure everyone does that. It's like, it's moved. And when I talk to my kids and they tell me they have never done this and none of their immediate friends have, they're very clear about that. But what they said, everyone's just using AI to write their essays. And the dumb ones, this is them speaking, but the kids who aren't as savvy, who haven't learned how the system works, right? Haven't learned how technology works and they then submit them and they get done for cheating because, you stick it back into chatbot GPT and it says, oh yeah, I wrote this or whatever. And what they said, but the savvy ones, they just have it write their essay and then they know how to get around that and adjust that because they know how the technology works and this sort of thing. And so, as a business guy, like I want the person who will solve the problem. And if the way that the English class is being written is now redundant, then they need to change the English class to be useful. And that's what's not happening. And that's what's so difficult to do with the current system, which is why you got to go outside of it. Yeah. And the stuff that's happening outside is just so wonderful. There's so many things and so many bright people doing so many, great things. And 9 out of 10 of them will fail, and some of them will survive. But just learning about them is just a joy. It gives you so much hope. for the future.
And I love that conversation you have with your children, because we've had exactly the same, and it's exactly the same response. And another one thing, I don't know why people are so sort of worried about this change. It's like it's a little bit like that kind of, we know the internet thing, and there's this thing called Google, but we'd still rather that you look up that stuff if you could go to the library. And I know the library is an hour away, but it's that kind of, in recent years, things have changed so much. You've seen how that works and how it's been beneficial, and how people have taken it and the rest of it. So this sort of next transition, while it's new, and I understand people's apprehension in some respect, you ought to be able to see the trends enough to realise that you have to jump on it, because all those people who didn't have a website, all those people who wouldn't go and look anything up, all those people who just sort of copy and paste from Google, like you said, you're going to get caught out. But at least you found the information, and now, the skill set is to find the information you need and present it in a way, and all those sort of things, or key skills that we've spoken about. It's it's mind-boggling. But like I say, we're talking about it all the time. Maybe it's different if you're not in a different bracket. But I'm curious in terms of when you were talking about all of this, was there a school teacher or a situation that you've experienced when you were younger, that sort of good or bad, that you kind of thought, actually, there's something here which I can take in, or indeed, like you say, leave alone, in terms of sort of creating something new?
In terms of helping me be more innovative?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to have a lot of great teachers. I mean, I've suffered with some bad ones, but I think I've been very fortunate with the people who've taken the time to help me, right, as I've developed. And my father was a university lecturer, my mother was an English teacher. So, it's sort of in the blood, education, right? And so I think one of the things I learned from my father was you don't have to accept authority. Okay, now that has definitely not served me in certain moments, okay, when I've been oppositional and this sort of thing. But he helped teach me to challenge what's there and what's happening, and that you don't need to just bow to authority. So just because I was 10 or 12 or 15 and, there's a way that you do something, that you have to carry on with it. And I think that's probably one of the most important things I've learned. So it's from my greatest teacher, of course, which, is my dad, as a boy and stuff. And also he is a teacher. So that's,
yeah. Fantastic. It's great advice and an education experience all in one, which I absolutely love. Yeah. And I think it's so easy to think there should be some sort of monumental situations, but actually one of the things I'm realizing too as I get older as well, it's all these small touch points. It's all these sort of threads of things that you learn, which are important, rather than now I'm going to sit down and change my life in that one thing. There are also situations like that, but generally speaking, it's just that kind of reinforcement of those sort of skills and ideas, which is so key.
Yes.
Is there a resource you'd like to share? And this could be personal or professional, but anything from a video, song, film, book, podcast, but something which, I'd say it's had an impact in some way.
That's had an impact. Wow, again, this is such an open, endless question. I mean, there's probably 500 things, right? And I've listened. I have piles of books on my desk. All of them I love, But I'd say the first book I ever read twice, was I was 12 years old and I read The Lord of the Rings. I think I've read it 5 times or something, but when I first read it at 12, I found it very inspirational, because the skill and the time and the care that went into creating this work, and after having read The Hobbit, right, which is kind of, B-team in some ways, wonderful story, right? But then when you go to The Hobbit, it's like, the guy invented like 3 languages while writing the book. And it's just so astounding. It just set the bar so high for me for what excellence looked like. And then of course it's a wonderful story. And even in that, excellent timeless book that has created whole sections of fiction and, well, it's fantasy and stuff, right? And that people have copied themes from it left, right, and center. There's still parts of the book that are really bad. Like you get about 100 pages in and there's 50 pages where it's just a snooze fest. If you just cut that bit out, you wouldn't miss a thing. So even with something as overwhelmingly powerful as that, there's still room for it to be even better. And so I really like that. And I think each of us probably has their own own story or resource, like that, which is that's a great question. That's why you ask it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and I love the sort of those sort of personal elements of it as well. I know one of the first things I did when sort of just at the end of my schooling, when I read my first autobiography, and I suddenly realised that reading a book wasn't what I was told it was in school, and that there was something else and interesting in that human and personal touch and dedication. And I loved it. And it was just that kind of, it sort of opens up a something in you which you can't quite describe in some way, but gives you an opening into a different world, whatever, like say, the topic or the book or whatever the thing happens to be. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because we'd read The Hobbit in class, and then I asked the teacher, I said, I was so inspired by it, I loved it, right? And so I found passion in it. And then I asked my teacher, like, where's more stuff like this? And they kind of looked at me like, I'm not sure if you're ready for Lord of the Rings, but why not Lord of the Rings? And I just think that's teachers at their best, right? They see there's a kid, they're passionate about something. And I was a horrible English student. That I was horrible. I was useless. I dropped it as soon as I could. I did my GCSE, I limped through it, and then I moved on to my A levels, right? So I was horrible at it. But I found, she found some passion in me there and helped encourage me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously, the acronym FIRE is really important from Education on Fire. And by that, we mean feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. And I know you talked earlier on about feedback, which I know can be so key, especially, like I say, still can be difficult even as we get older. But what else sort of strikes you when you see that?
I mean, obviously, I think these are 4 really, really important focus points, right? And it has me think of a story where a teacher, like, so I was, as I said, I went to boarding school in England when I was 16, and that meant traveling a long way. And it's before cell phones, you're just on your own. I mean, I had to get a bus, then a ferry, then a bus, then a plane, 14 hours. Then I had to get a coach and then a train and then a taxi to get to school. It took more than 24 hours. Okay. So, and it was an environment I wasn't used to living in the UK, and, it was very alien to me. And so there I was, and it turned out that I was doing math and further math, and that I had turned up doing GCSE math. Everybody else in my class had already done AO math. So I was so far behind everybody, okay, that it was shocking. And I was struggling. And I was struggling in math for the first time in my life. So it was very, very unsettling for me. Insecure, long way from home, no support, difficult, new, odd kid in the school. And so it turned out I had, like, one of the teachers was my sort of mentor. That's not the term they used. The term leaps out of my head. And so, that meant we met every 6 or 8 weeks or something. So I didn't see him for the first 8 weeks. I didn't even know. And then I have this meeting and I tell him about this, and he goes, look, don't worry. And there's a long story he told about, like, me coming into the school and all this. But what he did is he just gave me a different way of looking at my situation. And it was that, of course I'm struggling. I'm just behind because I didn't study this other stuff. And he goes, look, what you're going to find is it's going to get easier every month. You're going to catch up, because for all the rest of these guys, they're doing review, and for you, you're learning for the first time. Of course, you're going to struggle. Of course, your results are not going to be very good and your homework's going to be shoddy and all this. And he was right. I got stronger, but what it was is he helped create this narrative that helped me with, obviously there's a lot of resilience needed in that. He helped empower me. It was feedback, and it was quite inspirational for me. It created a story that I could hold on to in these difficult times to get me through. And I'm very, very grateful. And I don't know if he's still alive, but his name is Robert Parrish. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way that, like, say, you can sort of articulate through a story and an experience where, like I said, that none of that's about the grade or anything like that. It's about what you needed, and then the grades and the situations and the environments come out of it. And I think if there's one key thing we can share with anybody, that's kind of it. I think so often just making sure that you realise that if you can have all those things in place, you then just have to allow the rest of it to take care of itself, and life happens. So it's very interesting to see how those things work out from an older standpoint, sort of looking back when you sort of review these things. So, Matt, thanks so much. It's been fascinating chatting to you. I love the passion in what you're doing. I love just people who don't talk about these things, but they actually go out and they create something which is going to make a difference. So thank you for doing that as well. So yeah, please do share where people can find out more and also get in touch.
Yeah, so come to futuresforge.org. That's our website. And you should be able to link to everything, including the science behind what we're doing. There's links to scientific papers, a whole bunch of little videos to help you understand. And if you want to know more or interested in helping us, just shoot us a note.
Fantastic. Thank you so much indeed.
Great. It's my pleasure.
I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and thank you so much for being part of the Education on Fire community. Links and details of today's podcast are in the description. And if you would like to support the show with a small donation, that's a wonderful way to help me bring you more creative and inspiring learning. Please visit educationonfire.com/support. And remember, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.